Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's that time of the day again. It's another Scouse on the Scot, and boy, have we got a fantastic guest for you. We're going transatlantic for the third time in a row, so I'll let my big Scouse mate Ian tell you all about it.
Well, I'm kind of like in awe at the moment. Brian's laughing his head off here, but he doesn't realize how much he's influenced most probably everyone, or he's had an influence on everyone in this, who listens to this, should we say. Um, let me try and describe you, Brian, first, if that's okay, and if I hope I can do it justice. You were a columnist for Kerrang. You were the founding member of Metal Blade Records. Um, Basically, you was inducted into the Heavy Metal Hall of Fame by one and only Kerry King. In my eyes, you are officially metal royalty, and you've helped influence so many people, including myself, to get into this music genre, and I can only thank you, firstly. Secondly, it's an honor to actually speak to you, mate. For anyone who doesn't know, could you give us a overview of your up and comings in the rock industry? And I know it's going to be I'm not going to say, can you do it in 5 seconds or whatever? You just chat away, please, by all means, Brian. Like, tell us how you got into this industry.
Gotcha. Yeah, thanks for the nice intro there. I was just a huge fan growing up as a kid. I discovered I was a tape trader back in the day, and a guy I was trading tapes with in Sweden sent me an AC/DC live tape, and on the end of that was Iron Maiden's original Soundhouse tapes. And he said, "Hey, you might like this band Iron Maiden." That was a big change for me because I liked all sorts of music. I loved all the, 70s rock and metal stuff. But I mean, hearing Iron Maiden was like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing of all time. Got heavily involved in the new wave of British heavy metal, ended up doing the first ever US fanzine. I worked at a record store. I was promoting shows, just doing all these different things. And there was a scene in Los Angeles, a metal scene in Los Angeles, which existed that nobody knew about. Again, this is 1981, and there's no internet, no nothing. So I kind of got the idea, influenced by the new wave of British heavy metal and the compilation albums that those people did over there, to put together a compilation album of local LA heavy metal bands. So I did that. I never intended to start a record label or anything. Just put the record together. It had bands like Bitch and Malice and Cirith Ungol and Rats and this band named Metallica, well, Lars was a friend of mine. I didn't know James at that point, but put that out, and it did very well. And then I had no money. A distributor back then said, "Hey, we know you don't have any money, but we'll give you a pressing and distribution deal, which means you just bring us things and we can do all the heavy lifting." So I started doing that and just kept on putting out records. And over the years, we work with Slayer, Metallica, Amon Amarth, Gwar, Cannibal Corpse, Fates Warning, Armored Saint, a million of other bands, and just eventually grew into a record label. And it's still independent and still going strong today, just because we're all fans.
I think you're the same age as me, Brian. I'm 64, and I'm sure you're the same or very similar.
Yep,
So, I
yep,
mean,
exactly.
I we probably came into music in exactly the same way, just on either side of the pond. And I mean, I started with a cousin that was 5 years older than me that was working, could buy records. So I started listening to what he listened to, which was the old Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, all that kind of good stuff. And then I'm like you, I started getting into rock, and then punk came along, and then the new wave of British heavy metal hit, which to me was the first time I ever really thought anything sounded metal. Up until that point, I always thought everything was just hard rock. So, with Maiden and things like that. So, and Diamond Head was my favorite. Diamond Head was my personal favorite. So, and just a huge scene at that time. Just for people that might be watching this that's never got into heavy metal, what is it you think about heavy metal that spoke to your soul? And I mean, I could quantify it from my perspective, but what about you? What was it about it, do you think?
So the first time I ever heard anything heavy, I was 11 years old, and one of my mom's friends, kids I was friends with, I was over at their house, and he played me Deep Purple's Machine Head album.
Oh,
And I'd
yeah.
never heard anything like that before. It's just something about the guitars and the energy of the music and the vocals, just the whole thing. I was just in awe. I was like, "Whoa, what is this?" So a couple days later, I went out and bought it used at a store. One of the first albums I ever bought. And then my next door neighbor at the time said, "Oh, if you like Deep Purple, you should listen to Black Sabbath." So then I heard Black Sabbath, and that kind of got me down the highway there. But I was really lucky. I grew up and lived in Los Angeles, and in 1975, late 75, early 76, we had an FM radio station, which was very new at the time, and they
Mm.
played. What we know now as metal. They played Kiss, they played UFO, they played Judas Priest, Rush, all these bands that I'd never heard of, but I was able to hear them on this radio station. And I was like, oh, that's really great. That's really great. So I just got really immersed in a lot of that stuff. And then, of course, new wave British heavy metal turnaround. Because I'm like you, I listened to all that 70s great hard rock metal, however you want to call it stuff. I also like things like Elton John and just a lot of different types of music. I got into some of the new wave stuff. Being in Los Angeles and going to high school in the late 70s, there was the new wave scene with like bands like Oingo Boingo and Wall of Voodoo and the Go-Go's and all this stuff, which was really cool. And there's some metal bands around as well. But there's the punk scene, which I love the punk scene. And being in LA, we had the Germs and Black Flag and a whole bunch of bands. The Dead Kennedys would come down. So it's still my favorite all-time punk rock band is the Dead Kennedys. And they come down from San Francisco at least once a month. So I was into all that sort of stuff. And then Iron Maiden hit me. I was like, okay, this is it now. This is the new thing. And then I got into new wave British heavy metal, which was not easy to do from Los Angeles, but I was able to do it, thankfully.
So how did you
So
go about getting the British? So did you bring in? Were you at that time you were working in a record store, if I remember rightly, and you were bringing
No,
the
it
were
was
you bringing the records over?
Yeah, so before that, part of the story, if most people I'm sure know, but I was Lars Ulrich was a good friend of mine before Metallica existed. And there are basically three of us in Los Angeles that knew anything about that scene. There was myself, my friend John Cornarens, who helped me with the fanzine and stuff, and then Lars. And we drive all over Southern California to all these record stores, hoping and praying that there might be, a Tigers of Pantang single or something in the record store. But we all bonded over that because we all love the music. And when Lars had first moved to Los Angeles from Denmark, I don't think he ever thought he'd find other kids that were into the stuff he was into in Europe. So we all kind of bonded over that. So eventually, I used to hang out at a record store that was right by my house that actually what my best friend worked at, and we'd hang out afterwards. And at one point, the owner said, "Hey, would you like a job here?" And yeah. He said, "Well, we're gonna fire your best friend and hire you." So it took me a couple of minutes to figure that out, and I'm like, "Wow, this is my dream job, so I'm gonna take it." And that's when I started bringing in the music. I just started calling up the local independent distributors, you know, that would bring in all these other stuff. And I said, "Hey, can you find this band Iron Maiden for me? Can you find Tigers Pantang? Can you find Merciful Fate?" And slowly but surely, they started bringing all that stuff into the record store. We started selling tons of it, and it kind of, took off from there. But that was such a great job because it was just so much fun to turn, people on to this new form of music if they liked any sort of heavy stuff.
see, one of the things that you've just said there, a lot of people won't grasp because record stores are dying art. They, it's it's one of those where a lot of people have never experienced waiting on a Friday for the latest record to come out and stuff like that because everything's digital these days. You can get it straight away. If you like, what would you explain to someone like the benefits of a record store? Because one of our good friends who was on the show previously has just opened is just opened his own record store. What would you recommend to anyone who's never been to a record shop before?
What they
Well,
miss?
go to one.
Yeah,
Go to one. They're all over the place. It's this crazy resurgence in the last few years with vinyl and record stores. I mean, every city in the U.S. has them. I know that the UK has a lot of them, and it's just a lot of fun because It's a great place to discover music. I mean, obviously, there's a million other places you can discover music these days. So, it's easier to do that, but it's just fun to go to a record store. You're with other people there. You're looking through all the records. You know, they're probably playing something over the PA or over the stereo or whatever. And if you want to hear something, they'll usually play it. It's just a really fun place to hang out. And I've always, been a huge fan of record stores. And by the way, shout out to the UK to my friends at Raven Records, who are in London. So if you're in London, you want to go to a record store, they have an amazing record store there. So.
That's cool.
I will actually tag them in as well for you, buddy. So Raven Records. I'll make a note and I'll chuck it on the tags at the bottom.
Yeah,
So
they're awesome. They actually just came to. We have we have a Metal Blade museum in Las Vegas, and they came out to visit us and talk to them. And super, really good people. And they're same thing, just like all of us. They're just big fans and doing it because they love the music.
I was going to ask you about that because I'm back in Vegas in January, so I'll be checking it out. Do you want to just give a shout out where it is, what's in there, and
Yeah, so we bit of a long story, but I'll give it to you quickly. I moved to Las Vegas about 9 years ago. I just got tired of the traffic in LA and everything else. So I moved out there and we moved all of our storage stuff out there because it was way cheaper to do it in Vegas than LA. And I just thought it was kind of sad that all this stuff was just sitting in a storage unit. So I bought a house out there because they're super cheap and just put all this stuff in there just to kind of have it be for fun and for friends to come in from out of town. And I had guys like Charlie Benante from Anthrax and Joey Vera would come in and they'd go, "Hey, can we post pictures of this?" And I go, "I don't, yeah, whatever, I don't care." And then they would post it, and all these people start freaking out, like, "How do we see this?" And like, well, I can't, have just 30 people in a house in the middle of nowhere or something. So, um, we just decided to put it together. We found a really cool spot right near the strip. It's like 5 minutes away from the strip. And it's got tons of stuff. We have tons of Metallica, tons of Slayer, all the Metal Blade stuff. We've got guitars. We have a Guar, one of Guar's costumes. We have one of Lizzie Borden's costumes. We've got a million things there. And it's pretty cool. We've also got stuff that's Metal Blade related. Like we've reissued Alice Cooper and Thin Lizzy and Deep Purple and Stars. And we worked with Aerosmith and Guns N' Roses and Faith No More and Soundgarden on a bunch of different things over the years. So there's all artifacts from all that stuff there in Vegas. And just go to, it's open every day from noon to 3. Go to metalblade.com/museum, and that's where you get tickets and all the info.
I
That's
will be popping in and seeing you if you're ever around. I will be there in January anyway, so I'll
Yeah,
look.
let me know when you're in town. I mean, I kind of I'm back and forth a little bit. I'm here in Dallas now. I have a place here as well, but I'm back and forth a lot. So.
No, Brian, that'll be ace, mate. I'm looking forward to it, mate. While you're talking about that, like as I said, obviously, what do you do in your downtime? Do you what? It's a weird question, but what do you do?
Yeah, so I'm a huge sports fan. So the two sports that I follow the most are American football and ice hockey. Ice hockey being that's my favorite sport. So I call that my therapy because that way I can just kind of either go to a game and just watch the game or watch it on TV and just kind of like forget about all the other stresses and whatever else to do. But but there's not a lot of downtime. I mean, half the time I listen to music or whatever. So or hanging out with a girlfriend, whatever.
I've got to ask this. Apologies, John. I'm turning this into a show here, mate. Are you a Vegas Knights fan or a Raiders fan? Because I'm both. Unfortunately, I go to Vegas twice a year. So, or are you going to break me heart now and tell me something different?
Oh no, no, definitely Golden Knights fan. I'm a season ticket holder from day one, so
I'll see you go.
I adopted them. I don't really have a favorite hockey team so much because I just like different teams and I like the sport. Same thing with football.
Yeah.
So I have season tickets for the Raiders. That was my good friend Kerry King kind of forced me to buy these. They're next to his. I have two seats next to his two seats. Uh, and but there's a lot of guys who work for the Raiders who are huge metalheads, so that's super cool. They're really great. They've taken amazing care of us. So, then the stadium's beautiful. I don't know if you've been yet, but it's an awesome
I have.
stadium. They did a great job, and their games are super fun to go to. So, and I always root for them to win because I want Kerry to be happy, and also my friend James Hetfield is another big Raiders fan, and I want the city to be happy. So, yeah.
That's
I must
cool.
say,
Well,
I can't say too much. I'm a Commanders fan from back in the 80s when John Riggins was playing, so I'm a Washington fan.
Yeah, they're good. They didn't have a good game this last weekend, but they're fun to watch these days because they got a lot of good young players.
You said something there about, and this is the thing, and I've heard you talk about it because obviously I listened to you a few years ago when our good friend James Kennedy did a podcast with you. James is a friend of ours, and I heard you say it, and it's something that resonated with me that it doesn't matter where you go, even in the most strangest of places. So like I'm really into country music and country rock and things like that as well. But there's always this thing through them all that they're metalheads. It doesn't matter where you like you said it about like the guys and the different people that aren't linked to it, but they're huge metalheads. Isn't that amazing? I don't think there's another genre that has that vein through just about everything you go into.
Oh yeah, well, a quick funny story about that. So obviously you guys know who Morgan Wallen is.
Hmm.
So my girlfriend a few years ago, who was not into country, she's like, "Hey, can you get me tickets to see this guy Morgan Wallen? He's playing someplace in like Little Rock, Arkansas, which she and her best friend, who was big into him, should go." And this was kind of in the time when he was canceled or getting uncanceled, so he's kind of restarting his career a little bit. So I don't know who this guy is, and I look him up online, and it's like, oh, it's interesting. Like his band, I have a side project that's a metal band, and that's kind of crazy. So, and she said the show was great, like a lot of fire and all this, big production. So I go, he's playing in Shreveport, which is near where she lives. So I go, I'll buy tickets and I'll go see him. So I was hanging out with my friends, Vaughn and Kenny, who managed Kill Switch Engage and a whole bunch of other bands. And I was telling them about this whole Morgan Wallen story, and they go, "Well, this tour manager is a huge old school hardcore and metal guy. He would totally know who you were." I go, "Well, give me his number." So get his number, text him, say I'm coming to the show, and he's like, "Oh man, that's awesome. The guys will be really great, happy to see you." And we got there, they sent security in for us. They put us in our own like little room and backstage, and the whole band comes out. They're the nicest guys. They're all huge metalheads. They're asking me, a million Metallica stories, which is fine. And I've been really good friends with them since. So yeah, there are metalheads all over country music, big time, especially the musicians. I mean, I don't know if it's really country anymore, but Taylor Swift's bass player's favorite band is Slayer. So there you go.
Yeah, you can't go wrong. That's what I say. I mean, it's like we've interviewed like people in the past, Ian and I, and nearly all of them started by playing metal, like covers
Yep.
bands, and then found themselves going into country or country rock or whatever. But it's just amazing where you go and you start talking to people and you find out that actually that's what their go-to is, that they just love metal. It's something primal. I think it's just something primal about it, something primeval about it that speaks to most people.
Yeah, I mean it is kind of everywhere, and it's interesting. It's funny that you brought up country because I talk about that all the time. Because Jelly Roll's band is also metal fans, and they're kind of all over the place. But yeah, I mean, metalheads are all over everywhere. Like no matter what industry it is. Like if sports, there's a bunch of metalheads in sports, and business, just kind of everywhere. It's just interesting over all these years how, especially when I first started, it was kind of this, oh, it's a niche genre and it's going to go away and all this stuff, and that's why we were always like heavy metal's never going to die. And now all these years later, people who are like CEOs at banks and all this other stuff are huge metalheads. It's crazy.
Now, one of the things that I picked up with yourself as well is you must have been one of the few out and out metalheads from the 80s that actually didn't hate grunge, because I've heard you say it. And you actually liked grunge. Could you talk about that as well? About how you see how that affected the metal scene at the time?
Well, look, honestly, at that time, metal probably kind of needed to go away because all the major labels were involved. They're signing all these, the hair metal thing, which I was never really into, and it just was getting very radio and very light and not really what true metal was. And here comes this scene in Seattle with all these cool new bands that were, for all intents and purposes, playing heavy metal, but you couldn't call it heavy metal, and they couldn't say that they were metal. They couldn't even say that they liked heavy metal. But I mean, I knew all those guys. We went up and saw. I was working with Capitol Records for a minute. We went up and saw this band, Mother Love Bone, which is what became the two of the guys became Pearl Jam, and they were phenomenal band, like incredible. Andrew Wood, the lead singer, would have been the biggest rock star of all time, I think. But he sadly, overdosed of heroin before anything really happened with them. But yeah, I mean, I know all those guys, and they're all metalheads. A quick funny story about that with Alice in Chains, who are really good friends of mine, and we did marketing and promotion for Alice in Chains, like I mentioned earlier, Alice in Chains and Soundgarden and Faith No More and all that sort of stuff. And I loved all of those things. But I was at the Clash of the Titans in Toronto. Fates Warning was recording Parallels up there, and we went to the show, and I said we got to get there early to see this band Alice in Chains because they were opening, and nobody really heard much about them yet. But we were backstage, and I'm with the Fates Warning guys, and Lane Staley comes up to me and he goes, kind of whispers in my ear, like, "Do you think it's okay if I get an autograph from the Fates Warning guys? Like my best friend at home, and we're huge fans." And he was like total fanboy. It was awesome.
Oh, it's pretty brilliant. I mean, I know you work with all sorts of different metal, but the one I've never picked up on, I may be wrong, but I've never seen you working with any new metal. Is there a reason for that?
It
Look
wasn't
at that face.
it wasn't my thing. I mean, we look the only, and I don't really call them new metal, but we did try to sign Corn in the early days because they were just spectacular. And I don't really call them new metal, but it just wasn't my thing. I just never really got into it.
Mm.
It is what it is, but it just wasn't my thing. So we never did anything in that genre.
So I've got to ask, if you could pick three bands you would love to have signed, who would they be?
Uh, I mean, it's always hard to say because honestly, I've been super lucky and worked with so many amazing bands, and if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. We did two bands that we kind of lost out on. One, both probably my fault actually. The first was Guns N' Roses because they were playing around LA, and everybody's trying to get me to go see them. You got to go see this band. They're really great. I go, "Oh, they look like a glam band to me." And I just wasn't into glam. So I never went to see them. And then, of course, Appetite comes out. And I put in the advanced cassette. I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible. But we ended up working with them. We did all the underground like marketing for them. And I became good friends with the guys in the band and stuff. But I mean, look, I don't know if maybe we would put out an independent EP or whatever, but it's fine. And the other one that we kind of, or I kind of passed on was Pantera. They had done Cowboys from Hell, and they were managed by these guys from Concrete Management who were really good friends of mine, and they came to me and said, "Hey, we have this record, but we need X amount of dollars for it," which at the time was a lot of money. We had just signed a deal with Warner Brothers, so I think that's why because they were talking to all the majors, and just that's just too much money. I can't do it. Looking back on it, that's probably one. Yeah, maybe we should have done that, but all good. They all those bands ended up being okay. And of course, the big story, was always people ask me why we never signed Metallica after discovering them and putting them on Metal Massacre One. It's purely just no money. I didn't have any money. They didn't have any money. I mean, they came to me at some point and said, "Hey, we can put out a record for $10,000." I go, "I don't have $1,000, let alone $10,000 or any way to get it." So, but again, they did okay. It's all good,
Yeah,
and they're still good friends of mine too. So
oh, that's good to hear. It's good to hear that they're still doing okay as well.
yeah,
Just a little
a little bit,
bit.
a little bit.
So, obviously, we were talking about records before, and like, what advice would you give to new bands? Would you advise them to, like, would you advise them to go into the studio, do a studio at home recording? What would you say, like, if you're going to produce something to send to a record label, what advice would you give to someone who's up and coming?
Yeah, sure. Well, there's a few things. First of all, whatever music you want to play the music that you in the band want to play and want to hear. That's it. Don't listen to anybody else. Don't listen to your family. Don't listen to your any of your family members or your friends, managers, agents, whoever, the record labels. Don't listen to them. Just make the music you want to make, and listen to your influences, but don't sound like them. Take them and kind of create something a little bit different, but make sure it's something that you want to do. Because if you talk to any successful band, no matter who it is, and you ask them, "Who do you make music for?" And they say, "We make music for ourselves," and that's it. And that's the way to be successful. I've seen too many bands try to be something that they're really not. It just doesn't work, and metalheads can see right through that. So that's first and foremost number one. Number two, yeah, I mean, just however, if don't overspend and don't put yourself in tons of debt, but if you can get in the studio and do a couple songs, two, three songs, it's pretty easy to do these days as well, just for a demo. But I think it's kind of the path in the last, I don't know, I want to say 5 years or so is, and we encourage bands to do this. There's a lot of really cool independent labels, mom and pop labels out there, metal labels. There's tons of them, and that's really where I'd say any up and coming metal band should go to first. Like, get a deal with a small label, start to build your profile, build your fan base. It's a good place to do it because there's no pressure. You can just kind of do it from the underground. I think it's way cool. The fans are way, it, fans would much rather see a band on a small label out of nowhere because that makes it cool than coming a debut on like on Metal Blade. And then once you have a record or two in you, then you can move up the ladder, which is kind of what we've been doing a lot lately. So those are kind of the ways to do it, and definitely do all the business yourself. Make sure somebody in the band knows something about business. Don't listen to anybody else because it's very easy to get ripped off in this industry. And build your social media, build your fan base. All the things that you need to do, and that'll give you a chance at having success.
I think one of the things that when I talk to the bands that I sort of work with, and they'll ask about, so there's two trains of thought now. One which is, oh, you don't need a record label now. Another one is well, what you do need a record label. But then there's a lot of so-called record labels that, if you really drill down into it, are literally just distributors. Yeah, it's just a distribution platform. They're not actually a record. So they take your thing and put it out. So there's a lot of, so what if these young or grassroots bands are looking at record labels just now, what would you suggest they should look for to find the best fit for them?
Well, yeah, here's the thing is, I mean, technically you do not need a record label. That's true. However, you do need somebody to promote you because if you can't be promoted and you don't have a bunch of people promoting you, then nobody's going to know who you are. And that's really the difficult process is you've got to find, a lot of these independent, distributors or labels will help you a little bit. But at a certain point, that's, I think, more than a record label. We're a promotion company now. A huge social media team. We have between our staff of almost 40 people, and then you put in our distributors, you've got several hundred people that are promoting your band. And that just doesn't happen. You can't hire that many people to do it unless you had unlimited budget, and that's never the case for good bands. So
Yeah.
that's why you would need a record company is to do that. But you need to make sure you're talking to the right people and you get the right deal. Try to keep all of your publishing, keep all your merchandise, keep all those things. If you do sign with a label, don't give that stuff away. There's no reason for you to do that, and that's where you're going to make money down the road. Just work with good people. Just make sure whoever you're working with is good and has your best interest at heart, and are also fans of your band and other bands as well. So it's a tricky thing, but there are a lot of cool labels out there. So yeah, it just has to be the right fit with the right people. But you do need somebody to promote it. And that's the thing. That's kind of what I think a lot of certainly the metal labels have kind of swung into is, we promote the bands. I mean, all our socials, we've got over 2 million eyeballs that look at all our stuff. So that helps.
Pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So I always come up with some weird questions, so apologies, Brian. What was the last band t-shirt you bought?
The last one, band T-shirt. It was okay, yeah. It was a couple of weeks ago. I went to go see my very good friends Coheed and Cambria, and I bought one of their shirts.
Quality band as well,
Hey,
by the way. Yeah.
Love
Um,
them.
Another one for you. Have you got a funny story when you've been to a music festival, either band related, fan related, anything along those lines?
and
Oh
quirky.
boy, there's a lot of those. Let me
The
think.
quirkiest one then, Brian, the quirkiest one.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of them real quick. So so terrible. I said, well, you have to realize that we are in the white wine region and we hate Bordeaux and we hate red wine. So I was like, I was so devastated. But the little town we were staying in that was right by the festival had some wine shops. So I was just able to buy a bunch of my own, and they were nice enough to let me sneak in backstage to drink it. But I was just devastated by that. I was, oh my gosh.
I,
I think the other thing the other thing I learned going to European festivals was don't walk near the fence because that's where most everybody urinates. So I went over. I don't know why, but as I'm walking around the festival and I ended up kind of by the fence, I was like, "Oh, wet." I'm like, "It hasn't been raining here. What is going on?" And then I started to smell what was going on. I'm like, "Oh, let me not do that." So definitely don't walk by the fence. That's a bit of advice if you go to festivals.
I think that you can't explain that festival vibe to many. So back to it then, right? So thank you very much for the stories, the funny stories and stuff like that. I think you could most probably tell us loads of stories, and you could spend all day doing it. But I do have to ask you, like, you know what I mean? Who are your top five bands? Because you must get so much music from bands everywhere. Is there a top five, or is it something that you just can't actually put your finger on?
Like top five all time.
All time, yeah, top five all time.
All right. Well, that's it's fairly easy. Well, number one is Iron Maiden. It'll always be Iron Maiden forever and ever. That will never change. Let's see. So I would go Iron Maiden one. I'm gonna say Rainbow with Ronnie James Dio is number two.
Okay.
Yes.
Thin Lizzy is number three. Now it gets tricky. Yes, I see your Phil thing. There's also
Yeah.
now it gets a little tricky because it could be a million bands. I guess I'll say Sabbath just because we lost Ozzy and I should probably put Sabbath in there for now. I've been wearing Black Sabbath t-shirts pretty much constantly since then. Sabbath is number four, and then five is tricky because I don't ever want to say any of the bands that we work with or anything because they just you're too close to the whole thing, right? So it's there. Let me think. Five, who would be five?
I'll tell you
So
who
many
five would
great
be.
bands.
I tell you who it could be,
Oh,
Brian. I've heard you mention them before. The Manic Street Preachers.
yeah. Oh yeah, I love the Manic Street Preachers. They're
Yeah.
one of my favorite non-metal bands. They have an edge to it, especially their early stuff is just incredible. Five, I guess I'll go old school again because they're so influential and just say Judas Priest.
You can't go wrong with that at all.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? That's a great five.
Yeah,
Um,
I hear Kerry King's voice in my head because that's his favorite band is Judas Priest. So if I don't put them in there,
I'm like the
he'll
first
be
the
mad.
first live gig ever I went to was the Apollo in Glasgow, and it was Thin Lizzy on the Live and Dangerous tour. When they actually
Oh,
brought the album out, and that was, you can imagine that being your first gig. It was just mind
yeah,
blowing.
that's incredible. I'm insanely jealous. I did luckily enough get to see them with Phil twice. They opened for Journey actually in LA at 2 nights. So on the Black Rose tour with Gary Moore.
Yeah,
so
cool.
if you could create a super band, which you had two guitarists, one bass player, one drummer, and a vocalist, who would that be?
Yeah, that's I've
Iron
had to do
Maiden.
this a few times. It's always tough. Yeah, I'll just say Iron Maiden. Hey, no, so man, that's so hard. I've done it just a couple times, but it's so hard. I'll take Ronnie James Dio on vocals.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll take Dave Lombardo on drums.
that's a great show.
Steve Harris bass.
Mm.
Then guitars. Let's say even though he only plays usually one guitar, I will say Tony Iommi is one of them, and let's put Richie Blackmore as the other one. That would be an interesting group of
That'd
musicians.
that'd be quite a dark, heavy
Yeah,
undertone. I really like that. Actually, I
It was
could
also
imagine
it
that.
would also be an ego fest. Can you imagine?
yeah. Well,
Guys.
yeah. Well, and also, both Tony and Richie work with Ronnie James Dio, so there's some chemistry there too.
That's true. Yeah, that's very true. I noticed I was on your website earlier looking at the bands that you're working with just now, and one of the things I noticed was that bands can't send demos to you, they can't contact you, or that's how it read to me. Is that simply because you'd be absolutely inundated, Brian?
That's exactly the case. I mean, if we did that for a while, we got so many people sending us stuff. It was just it's impossible. We literally have to hire two or three people just to listen to all this stuff. So we can't do that. But people hit me up all the time on social medias and stuff. And it's if and there's enough. Look, if you know somebody, I think the other problem is quite honestly over all these years, the amount of just like people give you demos at shows or just coldly send in stuff. I don't. Maybe we signed one band doing that, maybe ever. But usually the way things happen, and this isn't just us, this is the music business in general, is somebody's whatever town you're in or country or whatever, just do your scene, and somebody there, whether it's a local promoter or a radio station guy or somebody, will go like, "Oh, this band's really cool," and they'll send it to the labels, and that's usually where we get most of our submissions from. But yeah, unfortunately, if we had to go, if we just put that up there, we would never. Like I said, it would be endless. I think we would get, we were getting like hundreds of submissions a week, which is just impossible.
What do you think about? I mean, there's not so many A&R people about now, or not that I've seen, and it seems that a lot of the big record labels are just going on to TikTok and places like that and just looking there. What do you think about that from a metal perspective? Do you think the metal scene uses TikTok well?
I mean, personally, I love TikTok. I'm a massive fan. In fact, we signed a band from TikTok, this band from China called Nine Treasures that we just put out their record. I found them on TikTok and just was like, oh wow, this is cool. I actually found a whole lot of really cool bands that I didn't know about. I mean, most of them are signed or whatever on TikTok. So I love TikTok, but we're still old school. We've got an A&R team that kind of scours the world for bands and looks for stuff, and that's kind of their deal. And then of course, if we do sign the bands, they're their product managers as well. But we're kind of old school. But I mean, look, TikTok is changing the landscape in a lot of ways. Just a couple examples are, Ghost. Like Ghost was, they're a
Mm.
pretty big band doing pretty well, but then all of a sudden this Mariana Cross thing goes viral, which the band had nothing to do with, didn't know anything about. Label didn't know anything about it. Management, nobody knew anything about it. Just the fans did it. And I think Tobias, Ghost's main guy's daughter was the one that said, "Hey, you were all over TikTok." He's like, "What?" And then the other example is Lorna Shore, which is another band, it's like extreme metal band that just went crazy viral, and now they're blowing up big time. I actually just saw them in Las Vegas at a big theater a few days ago. And so that's the thing. And then just, that's how these kids hear music now. Like my girlfriend's daughter is 13. And she and her friends hear everything off of TikTok. It's where they get all their music. They exchange the music there. That's where they learn about it. So it's a whole big thing. And the other thing I'll say about that too is I went to go see Cattle Decapitation and Immolation about a year ago here in Dallas, and it was a sold out show. But both bands were saying that this tour we've had more younger fans on this tour than we have in a long time, and so we know why that is. And they go, no, TikTok. I'm like, well, we're not on TikTok. So, well, you're not on TikTok, but your fans are on TikTok, and that's where a lot of these people find out about it. Like again, my girlfriend's daughter's 13, and her three 13-year-old friends discovered Cannibal Corpse on TikTok, and now they're massive fans of Cannibal Corpse. It's so crazy.
But you see, this is the thing. It's like a lot of metal, like older or middle aged, older sort of metalheads and that. Oh yeah, with bands, and they'll go, "Oh, TikTok, that's not for us." I'm like, it needs to be. It fucking needs to be for you. If you want to reach a younger audience, you need to do something. You need to do it in a way that relates to them, or get people that are fans to do stuff that will relate to other TikTokers.
Sure. And I love TikTok. I don't really do much on there because I want to keep the algorithm the way it is because I get new music tips. I get tips from, I'm a big comedy fan, the comedians. In fact, I don't know how I didn't pick up on him before, but I'd never heard of Jimmy Carr before. And he started coming up on my TikTok, and I go, this guy's brilliant. So, I become a huge fan of his. Things to do, like local things to do in Vegas or Dallas or wherever you are. All the algorithms come up, and the music thing too. So I love probably my favorite social media platform at this point is TikTok. So I probably spent too much time on it, but it's good.
Yeah, that's cool.
I've seen Jimmy Carr a few times, and I can safely say, yeah, me face. He's
Yeah,
just
he's
he's
good. He played here in Dallas about a month or so ago, so I got to see him live, so that was fun.
yeah, he's brutal as it comes. Like,
Yeah, I
good to
love
see.
it.
It's good to see some Americans actually getting some of the British humor as well. Like, so he's very sarcastic, should we say?
Yeah, well, that's
Sarcasm
that's
in.
that. Yeah, that's my sense of humor. Look, I grew up on Monty Python, so I've always been a
Oh,
huge
right.
fan of British comedians for
I
sure.
actually think, Brian, I think you're actually British. I think you just put that accent on. All your favourite music was British. Your favourite comedians is
Yeah,
British. You're British, aren't
yeah.
you? You're just putting that on.
Well,
You're
I
actually
will.
from Reading.
I probably I will say that my uncle did a like a whole gigantic family tree thing where he just did all this research and my family came from Denmark and Sweden and England, so I have all of that mixed in. In fact, supposedly one of our relatives was on one of those first ships that came over from England, and I've always every time I go to England and I go to castle, I'm hugely into medieval stuff and. I always weirdly going into these castles and stuff over there. You always feel at home there, so it's kind of eerie. But
It's,
yeah,
we just
love
inter
England,
we
love the
just
UK.
interviewed a band called Hippies and Cowboys a couple of weeks ago, and they're on their European tour just now. They're coming to Britain this weekend. So and that's all they were like, looking forward to was the castles and all that. Because as they
Yeah,
said, you don't really get that in America. It only goes back 200 years or something. Whereas obviously going back, you're walking into a castle here that could be 1,000 years old, and that's what they were looking forward to as well.
yeah, we don't have that over here.
Yeah.
So I've got to ask this question. Hypothetically, if you could go back in time and advise your younger self something in the music industry, what would it be?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've had that a couple times recently. So there's a couple of things. First thing is I would say trust your gut. Like
Oh,
trust your gut because a lot of times especially early on when you don't really know stuff and I don't know anything about the music business when I was starting and it took me a long time to figure it out and I made a million mistakes. But just trust your gut because whenever I trust my gut, it works. And when I don't, and I go with other people's saying something, or I go, well, I guess I'll try it that way, that usually doesn't work. And the other thing I would say is learn from your mistakes, which I think we've done a pretty good job of that over time because once you make a mistake or two, that's fine. And that's what I would say is like, hey, you're going to make mistakes. Just don't worry about it. It's going to be good, but just learn from those mistakes. And those are two things that probably would have saved me a lot of stress and anxiety if I would have known that.
Yeah, that's cool. And I mean, it's my the big man's sitting back because I know what he's going to come up with next, and this is the bit that everybody we interview absolutely fries their head. Although I think we know the answer, we know your final answer to that. So he's coming up to that. But if there's anybody watching this, okay, and you're looking for advice, um, we're looking for advice on you. So you said like play the music you want to play yourself. You should be the biggest fan of your own music to a degree, and then find your clan, find your crowd, or let them find you. What do you think it is that makes a band that's been successful over a longer period of time? We see a lot of bands that come and go very quickly. The ones that's got longevity, it's got what do you think it is that they've got? Do they evolve, or is it what is it? What do you think? What's the quintessential X factor?
Well, two things. Number one is just remaining creative and remaining a fan and being excited about making music and not looking at it as a job. But the other thing is honestly is you have to have the right team around you. You have to have good management. You have to have a good agent. You have to have a good record label, a good lawyer. All the people surrounding you have to be good. And I equate it to a car. If you have a car that has four tires, all four of those tires are going in the same direction, that car is going to go fast. When one of those tires is flat or going flat or not working well, you're not going to go anywhere. And that's the key to why is Metallica one of the biggest bands on earth? Because everybody around them is fantastic and they've been with those people for years and years and years and they're the best of the best and that's when you work with those people that's really important and anytime any successful band always there's always good management, there's always good agents, good record labels, all of that stuff is there. And usually the bands, because this is always the thing, like, hey, why, how come this band, I love this band, well, how come they weren't bigger, and I love that band. It's always comes down to that. Always problems either within the band or usually just with people that they work with that didn't get it or they weren't with the right people and it's just they never got the right opportunities.
And you also mentioned earlier about somebody, at least one person in the band, understanding the importance of the business side,
Hmm.
not just the creative side.
Yeah, because what bands have to remember is we work for you. Like I think a lot of bands think that they work for the record company or the management company. It's like, no, no, no. We all work for you. You are your own company. We work for you. So you need to make the right decisions for you as a band. And that's why it's important that every band's got at least one guy in the band that understands business and knows business. If you don't know it, read a book, watch a YouTube video, do anything because that's the way it is. I mean, look at you look at the Rolling Stones, it's Mick Jagger. You look at Metallica, it's Lars Ulrich. On and on and on, and that's just super important because again, this is a business, unfortunately, and a lot of people get into it because they love music and they want to play music. They don't want to deal with the business. That's fine, but somebody within that band has to stand up for yourselves because again, you're the company. We all work for you.
I think a lot of bands that think that they work for the record label, it can be down to the record label as well, can't it? I mean, I think the one thing that comes across with you, Brian, is that you fell into the record label thing because first and foremost you're a fan and you're always going to be ultra fair to the bands, but not all record labels are like that. So I think there might be an element of that as well.
Yeah, 100% true. And again, that's if you're not with the right record label that doesn't have your best interests at heart. That is, in a lot of cases, not going to work out.
So it's time.
It's time.
I
If we could do a drum
apologize,
roll here, it's time.
but I already feel that I know the answer when you're
Well,
going to
don't
finish.
ask that one, mate. Don't mention
I've
them.
got it. I will do. It'll be on there. So we have this called Winner Stay On. So basically, I'll give you two names. One of them stays on, and it carries on until the end. So start with the first one. Black Sabbath, Aussie era. Black Sabbath, Dio era.
Oh, wow. That is
Horrible.
that
I'm sorry.
that yeah, that is
I can't believe I'm doing this to rock up my metal royalty. Like I
I
am
know.
really sorry about this,
I
Brian.
mean, I
I'm
can't
not.
say both, obviously. So I so hard because I love both of them so much. But I'll go with Ozzy or Sabbath just because we just lost him. And my favorite Sabbath album of all time is Sabotage, which he's on. So we'll go there.
Black Sabbath. We'll just call it Black Sabbath now. Then, seeing that
Yep.
we split those two out. Black Sabbath versus Def Leppard.
Black Sabbath.
That
That
was
was
quite
quick.
quick. That one. That
He
yeah,
obviously
you
doesn't
shot
like
that
Def
one
Leppard.
straight down.
I love the first two Def Leppard records. I love them. They're phenomenal records. But after that, they kind of lost me a bit.
Hmm. Pour some sugar on
Sabbath
me.
versus Sabbath versus Motorhead.
Oh wow, that's another tough one. Sabbath versus Motorhead. Oh, Sabbath.
Sabbath versus Diamond Head.
Another tough one. Oh, I'm just gonna say Sabbath just because they've been around longer.
Sabbath or Judas Priest.
Here we go. Now I, I need a minute. Oh, geez. Wow, that's really tough. Sabbath
Wow. Okay.
by a
Uh,
hair, by a hair.
Sabbath or Saxon.
I love Saxon, but Sabbath.
And the last one, which I think you know what's coming.
Oh yeah,
But for all the viewers out there, Sabbath versus Maiden.
of course, Maiden.
Is there any band that you would choose over Maiden?
No,
Not even Metallica.
none. Nope, nope,
Yeah.
nope. Maiden's my all-time favorite band. They've kind of been that way since the moment I heard them, and they still are spectacular and phenomenal. And again you talk about the reason a band's been around a long time. And if you would have told 20-year-old me that I'd become friends with Rod Smallwood, I would have said you're insane. But I've like happily can call Rod Smallwood a friend and a really great guy. And I mean, what a phenomenal manager. And
Oh
you know,
yeah.
there's a there you go. Why is Maiden so successful and been around for so long? I mean, look, they're great and they're phenomenal and all of that, but they have one of the best managers ever. So
That's ace. That is absolutely ace. All I've got to say is it's been an honor. I am very privileged to be able to say that I've spoken to you because, like I say, everyone everyone who's listened to metal has had some dealings with yourself, Brian. Like, so we can only thank you for doing what you've done over the past. Apologies about this, but I'm going to say 40 years,
40,
43 years.
43,
Yeah,
43
43. I
43.
years,
worked it out today. I went, my God, 43 years. That's mad.
and you're still loving it, even like to this day. Is there a day?
Yeah.
Is there a day that you're going to go? I'm going to pass the torch on to someone else, or you're just going to go? Actually, no, I'm enjoying this still.
Well, here's the thing. As long as I'm physically able to do it, I'm gonna do it, and I'm not gonna sell to a major label at all. We do have a secession plan for with some of the younger people working at Metal Blade. That at some point, I wish I could live forever, but that's just not gonna happen. So at some point, there is a secession plan, and because I want it to be, I want the label to continue to go on. It pains me to see, like for example, Roadrunner Records, which we started out with and worked with them for many, many years. And, eventually Case just like, I'm going to get out and sold the company. And now it's a name that isn't really there anymore, which is really sad. So I want to, hopefully keep the Metal Blade name going as long as possible.
Well, I can only say fingers crossed because you're doing a sterling job, mate. And keep on churning out as much music as you can because we're just loving it.
Yeah. Thanks. And thank you guys for all the support too. I mean, just not for people like you, we can't do it. So.
Oh, man, we like I say, it means a lot. I can't believe you're even saying that. John, over to you, buddy. Let's wrap it up.
Well, there you go. Another Scouse on the Scot. You know what you need to do? You need to subscribe. You need to tell your mates about it, especially this one with metal royalty. You don't get it very easy. This is a man that could easily have said no to us. We are just two guys over in Britain trying to do a bit for the music. So Brian said yes. You should say yes as well. So subscribe. So until the next time, keep it rock.